Welcome to The Connecting Point.
Questions are not stories. I say that on purpose because when I open up the floor, sometimes people just talk. I'm going to try to get through as many as I can. Sometimes I'm long-winded myself, so I'll do my best. We're mature enough to handle this? Okay. Sir, you're first. Yeah, you.
Darwin's name came up a couple of times in there, and this is just a question on your behalf. Enjoyed your talk quite a lot. What do you think Darwin would say if he were sitting here and he just heard you?
Okay, what would Darwin say today if he was sitting here and he just heard me? I have a whole talk called What Darwin Didn't Know. And I asked the question at the beginning of the talk, if Darwin were alive today, would he still come up with evolutionary theory? And I asked the same question at the end of the talk. And invariably people say, no. And I say, yes. Because the carnal mind is enmity against Christ. It's not subject to the law of God. Neither indeed can be. The unbeliever, even when faced with enough information to know that God is there, Romans 1 says they turn away anyway. They can't do it. And so what we're seeing, actually, there's a lot of younger professors who are not Darwinists. They believe in Gaia, that the universe is alive. There's many who are teaching this thing called emergent complexity, that complexity is woven into the fabric of the universe, so complex structures naturally get produced through random reactions. And there's others that are saying aliens did it. Now, I don't like the aliens thing because that's called intelligent design. Worse, it's just passing the buck. Oh, you can't explain it here, so you're explaining it through some imaginary something that lives somewhere else, some imaginary... No, this is not science. It's metaphysics. Gaia theory is metaphysics. That's religion intruding into science again. But because of this revolution that's happening in science as far as our understanding of the way things work, everything is changing. And old school Darwinists are like, we can't explain this anymore. What's the answer? It's not going to be the God of the Bible. Fair enough? Okay, ma'am. Okay, so she was watching a documentary on sea turtles, and they're coming out of their little nest, or the little things are coming out of the nest, and they're racing toward the ocean. And the announcer or the narrator said that they're hardwired to do that. Is that a good argument? Yeah, it's a good argument. No one understands how instincts are programmed into DNA. And those sea turtles have never seen the moon, have never seen the ocean. They have no idea. All they've known is life inside the egg and now a pile of sand. And they pop out, oh, I'm a sea turtle, I'm going to do that. It's a mystery. I have no idea how such things are coded into the genome, and once they're coded, how they can change. Because instincts keep things alive. And most instincts, if you change it, like what if the instinct to be afraid of large animals disappeared in humanity? Well, a lot of people are going to get eaten. That person gets eaten, that keeps the instinct in everybody else. So, it's a really interesting argument, and you can watch evolutionists be kind of shuffling around and really uncomfortable when you talk about hardwiring of behavior in DNA. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Okay. There's a pit in Texas, which is a half-completed super collider that they stopped because George Bush said we're not spending all that money, which is crazy because that was his state. Was it Bush or Clinton that did that? I can't imagine if Bush would have stopped billions of dollars being spent in Texas. I don't know. Either way, we built it and we stopped it. It's too much money. So the European Union picked it up and they dug a hole in the ground and there's this amazingly huge ring underneath Switzerland and France, I think. Not just Switzerland. It's, I don't know what the diameter is, miles in diameter. All these superconducting magnets, they spend billions of dollars to find one thing. The Higgs boson, the God particle. when people started figuring out, Rutherford and Lawrence and Einstein, at least theoretically, but these other guys, the atom smashers, Rutherford, Lawrence, trying to think of some other names. They're smashing atoms and finding parts of atoms, and they start having to work up what we now call atomic theory. And atomic theory was protons, electrons, neutrons, quarks, things called baryons, things called leptons, gluons, neutrinos. There's all these parts that they're figuring out, and there was one part they never found. It's called the Higgs boson. It's the thing that gives matter substance. My best way to explain it. And theoretically, they knew it should exist, but they could never make enough energy in an atomic collision to produce one. So they built this gigantic ring. Now, the reason the ring had to be big was because they have to accelerate these things in a circle. Now, you've been on a merry-go-round, right? What happens when you get too far to the edge? You go, ah, and then you fall off, right? So in order to spin around in a circle really fast, you would need a really big merry-go-round. And that's what that thing is, giant merry-go-round. They smash things in, and sure enough, they take some photographs and some computer things, and they said, we've discovered the Higgs boson. It's the last piece of the puzzle, and it completes atomic theory. Now, I know there's crazy stuff in atomic theory that make no sense. Like two electrons, one spinning this way, one spinning that way, that are paired up. If you separate them, even by thousands of miles, when you do something to that one, it happens instantaneously to that one also. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. I cannot explain it, but I know from experiments that it's true. I'm not sure, and I'm not going to go so far into it so quick. Ask me a question after I get to this. If I go there, I'll get so far off track, I'm already off track. Okay? All right. So they find the Higgs boson. It's the last piece of the puzzle. Here's the problem. This is an amazing problem. There are a lot of things in the universe that if you change them just a little bit, the universe can't exist as we know it. A little change in the nuclear forces and atoms can't exist. The Higgs boson is one more example. There's this range of the one particular parameter. I don't know if it's mass, but it wasn't mass, but let's just call it the size and how heavy the thing was. It's not the right one. It could have been its charge, or not the charge. Whatever it was, the thing. There's this range of possibilities. Say, okay, it could be anywhere in here and it's fine. But it wasn't anyone in here. It was on the very edge of possibility to 11 decimal points. So if it was 0.000000001% off, the universe could not exist. I love fine-tuning problems. The universe is a weird place. There's all these things that say the universe should not exist. And yet it does, and we're literally on the edge of a knife between existence and nothing but electrons floating through the universe. Cool, huh? Now, I'm not a particle physicist. If you ask me that question, I'm not going to be able to answer it. Do you know more about particle physics than I do? Oh, do you, man? Well, keep going. I don't want to touch it. Is that all right? I don't have to know everything, right? Okay. Thanks for stumping me. Oh, yeah, okay. Please. Please. Okay, in respect to God saying the sins of the fathers pass to the third and fourth generations, is there anything in genetics that suggests that? No, but yes. There are genetic factors that, serotonin receptor genes and things like that can be defective in people, and that makes them unable to relate to other people. They tend to be ex-murderers. So there are genetic components to crime, and I don't want to say that we're a machine that's only coded and programmed, because then we don't have a spirit. I don't believe in genetic predestination, because of that thing I showed you about how you can change your genes. But there are some people who have issues with neuroregulation and things that it makes them off. And that could be inherited possibly. On the other way, there's I have a friend. She lives in in Washington State near on the West Coast. And she was born in the summer of 1946 in Holland, right after what the Dutch call the Hunger Winter. The Hunger Winter. That's in the winter of 1945. 1945. World War I ended in 45. World War II ended in 45. It was the winter of 44 to 45. The Nazis got so mad with the Dutch resistance that they cut off all food shipments into Holland that winter and tried to starve the people. And what they found out was that the children born the next summer grew up with a really odd characteristic suite of metabolic problems. Hypertension, diabetes, all sorts of, hey, wait a minute, this is, and all, like most of them had it. But when they looked at it, wait a minute, not all of them have it because it depends upon which trimester the woman was in when she was starving. And then this woman was born then. She was born. She was one of these hunger winter babies. And you know what? She's shaped like a grape. She's as wide as she is tall. Loveliest, nicest person I've ever met. But I don't know, because there's a lot of big people in America, but that's a classic shape for a child born then. And then they've studied the grandchildren. And the grandchildren are being born with not all of them, but an elevated risk of the same traits. So it looks like something that happened to grandma is affecting the grandchild 70 years later. So natural selection might be operating here for something that happened in the environment back there. Natural selection breaks down at that point. If it can't see a clear signal, and this is called epigenetics, it gets totally muddied, and natural selection is not what drives evolution. So, can the sins of the fathers be passed down? No, not really. But genetic effects can be passed down. And potentially, they can influence people's behavior. Not perfectly, because there's not, we hear it a lot today. I'm born that way. It's not true. Because that specific topic, this children's room, I don't want to talk about it, but that specific topic, there's a lot of fluidity there. You're not born that way. You want to behave that way because it's addicting, essentially. Okay. I got so far off topic already. I don't know how. Okay. I ran around in circles in that question. I can't answer it perfectly. Yes and no, and I try to throw a few anecdotes in there to help it out. Is that okay? All right. There's a hand up over here somewhere. Sir. Actually, you just mixed two different ideas. The scientist looking for the God particle, that was the Higgs boson I just described that was discovered in the super collider. And you said, are they looking in the genome for it? Would not the God particle be in the genome? Not a particle. But would there be a signature of God in the genome? Is that a little better? Like God said, I was here. Okay. There's a really interesting book called The Biotic Message. A friend of mine, Walter Remine, wrote it. And he says this. He says, we would not expect in life for God to say, I was here, in language, in words. However, if God did create life, we would expect hierarchical structures, very well ordered, that defy evolutionary theory. And that is what we find. So yes, there's an exclamation point, God was here, but it's not written in Hebrew or English. It's written in obvious facts of science. And we cannot ignore them. So everything I just showed you, that was God saying, yeah, I did this. Okay? Cool. Sir? The question is about using DNA in courts of law, in life insurance, in medicine, can it be used against you? I'm sorry, sir, you have a risk of heart disease according to that gene right there. Yeah, I know you're a triathlete. Whatever. You have a risk of heart disease, and we're not going to insure you. This is a very sticky ethical problem that a lot of people have been struggling with for a long time. It might be that an insurance company says, no, I'm not going to insure your child because your child has that, and they're going to die when they're 15. Or the government passed a law saying no insurance companies are allowed to make judgments based on the genetics. We don't have an answer to that yet in our society. We're still struggling with it. Because in one sense, if you don't want to insure a smoker, if you want to charge a smoker higher rates, well, why wouldn't you charge the person who's got these genes that, well, you're going to die when you're 50, man. It's written in your genes. Shouldn't we charge them a higher rate? That's a legal question. It's an ethical question. And I'm not sure it has been quite ironed out yet. And it's sticky. What saves us, though, is all people have mutations. All people have things that are eventually going to kill them. We're all in the same boat. We're not going to escape it. And as long as insurance companies keep us all, treat us like a pool, then it should be okay. You may. In the modern world, when do we discover it? I believe DNA, the molecules discovered in the 1800s. Biochemists, they did absolutely amazing things in the 1800s. I can't believe what they discovered. So we knew this molecule called DNA. We knew it was very long. We knew it was an acid, and we knew it was very sticky. In the 1910s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, everyone said the stuff of life is in proteins because proteins are very variable. DNA, that's just a bunch of mushy gunk. There's some critical experiments that were done in the 40s and early 50s. First of all, they learned that traits could be passed on through DNA, the Hershey-Chase experiment. I have no idea how they figured that out. They're brilliant. And then Watson and Crick in 50-something, they discovered a three-dimensional structure of DNA. And then they figured out what genes were like and what carried genes. And then they figured out that AAA makes a glycine, but AAC makes a serine. Wow! And that took about a decade of many PhD scientists figuring that out. And then after many years, they finally sequenced the entire human genome in 2003. It's been there in the halls of science the whole time. But it's like it took until just the last couple of years before it really started impacting the lives of the average person. Personalized medicine, ancestry testing, paternity things. There's really some profound implications today. In the 1970s, there was so much theoretical stuff, and it really didn't impact us at all. That's probably why you've heard about it more recently. Now, I haven't actually done a good job because I haven't pointed you to any other resources because I always forget. Yes, ma'am.
How close are we actually to someone being successful to cloning electricity?
How close are we to someone being able to clone a human? Yesterday. We routinely clone prize steers, racehorses, pet dogs. There's a company in South Korea. After your animal dies, you can take a needle biopsy, put it in the bag, send it to South Korea, and Fifi's back! But it's not Fifi. It's Fifi's twin. Identical twins are clones of one another. Single leg that's split. Now, they're not actually genetically identical, but they're almost genetically identical, but they are clones of one another. The technology has advanced to the point where there's nothing theoretically preventing people from cloning humans except for law. But we know what people do. Why did they climb Mount Everest? Because it was there. Of course, I'm certain that someone has already done it, but they've washed the results down the drain. That's called murder. This is very much a pro-life issue. It's an incredibly pro-life issue. In fact, as they're doing experiments, what happens is that thing starts to develop, and it develops with a deformity. Terminate. Yeah. And the risk of deformity and accident is very high. Now, I don't want to insult anyone if you've gone through fertility clinics, but the risk of a certain characteristic suite of birth defects is elevated in IVF children. They are at a higher risk of specific developmental abnormalities than naturally born children. Why? Because you have the egg outside of the mother. It's in a test tube. You stick it with a needle, or you put it in a thing and you allow it to get fertilized in a dish, and you let it develop. That's not a normal environment. In fact, it's very stressful for the egg, and the egg has to turn on genes it wouldn't normally turn on to keep itself alive because it's under stress. And it affects the development of the individual. So that's a big issue in itself, but human cloning means the wasting of potentially millions of little human lives. Especially once China kicks in, because they're going to industrialize it. And they have no moral reason not to kill lots of Chinese people. Look at their history over the last 50 years. Okay, so that's a downer. I don't want to talk about human cloning. It only makes me sick to my stomach. All right, you and then you. Yes, ma'am. Okay. That's quite. Would a human clone have a soul? If you had a twin sister, you would think your sister had a soul. Right? But if they cloned a cell from my big toe and made a little me, would that person have a soul? I cannot answer the question. Theologians for a long time have wrestled with, where does the soul come from? Does God give it, or is it like divided off from the first individual? I don't know the answer. I cannot answer it. It's not a scientific question because it's a spiritual question. Okay? A lot of people, in fact, I make a prediction. The first cloned human being is going to be murdered by a non-cloned human being because people are not going to be able to handle it. I made that prediction. You heard it here. Of course they'll have a soul because they can walk, they can talk, they can relate to Jesus, and we can share the gospel with them. They're not a machine. And we have to treat it that way, or we're going to go crazy, because I do believe it's right around the corner. As terrible as it sounds, there's technologically nothing preventing us from doing that. Yes, we can be evil. Yes, ma'am. If you clone a pet, it will not recognize you. It's a brand new animal. It has no memory. In fact, that's going to make a lot of people mad. Oh, I just cloned my dead wife. Yeah, well, guess what? She grew up and now she doesn't like you because she's an individual. Okay, second question. If it's rated R or PG, okay, let's see what boundaries we're talking about here. Males and females have the same chromosomes, but females have 2 X chromosomes. Okay, we'll let this be the last question. I'm going to go back in time to this picture. This is the genome of a male, because at the bottom end over here, there's a Y chromosome and an X chromosome. Females have 2 X chromosomes. So males have chromosome that the female doesn't have. We have the same number of chromosomes. I remember when I was in college, I was taught the Y chromosome is a shriveled up piece of junk vestigial DNA. Oh, okay, I had more to that, but I'll say it in a minute. Yes? Yep. When we start messing with our bodies and changing our bodies. Oh, if we genetically engineer ourselves to make us taller or green so we can photosynthesize. Okay. Okay, that's close to overstepping the bounds. Okay. For you adults, if you understand that, I don't want to repeat it too loudly. Let's say this. You cannot change your biological gender. In fact, it's not just the chromosome. There is a whole history from in vitro, from in utero, hormones kicking in. More hormones kick in after you're born, and more hormones kick in during puberty. But just if you turn off the puberty ones, you still got patterning from earlier. There's thousands of genes separate males and females. We have the same genes, but some of them are on, some are off, some are on high, and some are on low. There's humongous differences in those things. At puberty, there's a radical change. But even before that, in fact, that Y chromosome, it's not a piece of junk DNA. It's only got a few genes on it, but those genes change the genetic expression of thousands of genes on all of the other chromosomes. It's not junk at all. It's profound. And think about the difference between men and women. We don't look the same. We don't act the same. We don't think the same. That's controlled by that little Y chromosome. Now, if you want to get into that issue, I'm going to tell you, it is not cut and dried. People struggle with this. I have a good friend that I worked with in Miami who, I don't want to say it out loud, let's say her stepfather was not a nice man. What happens when she grew up? Well, she turned to the wrong direction. And she said to me, Rob, it's harder to quit that than it is to quit crack. And she decided that because she was a Christian, she goes, I'm going to live for God, and you know what? I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have a significant other because I can't stop. But it was something that hit her, and she's a big girl, and she had a mustache. She's manly looking, but she's going that direction because of the horrible upbringing that she had. I can't blame her. But kudos to her because she said to herself, the price for entering the kingdom of God is following God's pattern, even if I can never be happy with the direction I want to go. I'm just going to never have anybody. Wow. God calls us to put ourselves second. We are naturally selfish people. We all are. Talk to my wife. Oh yes, I am very selfish. But we're called to put ourselves second for the kingdom in all ways. This particular issue, people don't want to put themselves second because it's really fun and a little dangerous and risky, and actually really dangerous and really risky depending upon which one you choose. And they like playing Russian roulette with their own lives. It's a big adrenaline rush, etc., etc., etc. However, we can mess around with the hormones of a cow and mess up the gender of the calf. And that calf will be messed up. So there are environmental things that can happen in the mother that might affect the child. But that means there's a cure. Wait a minute. They're not talking about cures. No one wants to talk about a potential cure because that means there might be something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me. I was born this way. Better than that. I have seen enough of it. I know some people don't recover, and I can't fault them for struggling. But I've seen enough people who've completely flipped around to the biblical way. I know that Jesus can fix anything. So how do we approach a person? With love and pity, not acceptance. That's not, you're not advocating the lifestyle, but you can't condemn it. Because you know what? One thing is, there but for the grace of God go I. Two is, let's say it this way. You all know a lot of people that are married to a very ugly spouse. And you know some people who gush all over their ugly wife or their homely husband. You know people like that, right? And it's just like, oh, that's so cute. No, it's not just cute. It's up here. They're not lying. God has given us an amazing capacity to latch on to a single ugly human being and that person replaces all of our knowledge of beauty, and they completely replace. Now, our definition of beauty is that. That is a blessing. Because age is called uglification. We don't look like we look like when we're 20, when we're 80. And yet, you've seen old couples, and the guy's holding her hand, and he's telling you how beautiful she is. Oh, man, I wish I was like that. More. That is the most, this drive of humans and his genetic latching, this psychological latching is the single most psychological thing that God gave to human beings. The most profound period. Imagine what happens to a person when they turn that powerful thing in the wrong direction. They don't just get healed. You can't just say, oh, just stop doing that. It doesn't work that way. It is profound and deep, and they hurt. Now, do they hate us? Yeah, a lot of them do. Are they aggressively pushing their agenda against God's agenda? Yes, absolutely. And the things that have happened just the last couple of years are absolutely shocking. I could not have predicted it 10 years ago. I predicted it, but I figured it would be 50 years in the future, not 5. So, yes, we have to advocate against it, but not like those kooks from that church what church is that? Yeah, that Westboro Baptist. We're not those people. And yet, our opposition wants Westboro to exist so they can call us Westboro people. So, love, patience, diligence to make sure that we can't be blamed. The old, get the log out of your eye before you try to get the speck out of your friend's eye. It's a very difficult thing. And I'm sorry, our kids are being destroyed. Even Christian kids in Christian homes going to homeschooling, they are not immune from the culture. I know enough young teenagers now who are questioning that should never have been exposed to it, and they are anyway. And there is a fire raging through our culture right now. And it's really, really sad. Okay, I hope I handled that carefully. By the way, my niece is that way. I love my niece. I talk to her when I see her. I want her to do well in life. No reason to hate her. She's a nice person. My sister's best friend growing up, he was that way. But you know what? He didn't have a dad, and all the boys beat him up all the time. I can't really fault him for going that way when he had no good role models. And yet, I certainly don't agree with the lifestyle. All right. Did I handle that okay? Well, I just went 15 minutes over because all right. I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to let you close. Thank you all very much. It was a lot of fun.